The British are going their own way from January 1st. The Prime Minister has to prove that he can do something with the new independence. Great Britain has left the EU for good. The country has been out of the internal market and the customs union since midnight on New Year's Day. Now the question arises, what does Boris Johnson want to do with the new freedom? The moment is finally here, now we have to seize it, said the Prime Minister this week after Parliament had passed the free trade agreement with the EU. The fate of this great country is in our hands. Johnson is betting that things can only go up after the corona year. Brexit should take a back seat. Instead, he wants to set new accents in foreign and domestic politics. So what about foreign policy? Great Britain holds the presidency of the G7 group of leading industrial nations this year. Johnson wants to invite India, South Korea and Australia to the G7 summit this summer. The idea is to form an alliance of democracies against authoritarian states like China and Russia. Johnson wants to prove that Britain remains a relevant player on the world stage. And what about trade policy? Under the motto Global Britain, Johnson wants to show that the country outside the EU can conclude trade deals more quickly. Well, so far that didn't work. In recent months, the government has already agreed successor agreements for most of the free trade agreements that the country had as an EU member. First of all, that leaves out another 680 other agreements the EU had, and all of them are rollover deals. None of them are new, so nothing has been proven yet. Only when they can manage to agree new trade deals from scratch faster than the EU, can prove that. New ones are to be added in the future, including New Zealand and Australia. Larger contracts, however, are not in sight. And New Zealand and Australia, that's a thing, the EU has a big head start there. The long-awaited trade deal with the US will go on because it's not a priority for US President-elect Joe Biden. Johnson visits India in January, but here too, at best, initial declarations of intent are to be expected, and there's a big hook on that one. India will only agree to a free trade agreement if it contains free movement of workers. I can see that work out with the British former Brexiteer public. What about climate? In November, the Kingdom will host the World Climate Conference in Glasgow. There, Johnson wants to oblige the participants to make their economies climate neutral faster. Great Britain wants to set a good example. The country wants to reduce its emissions by 68% by 2030. It aims to be climate neutral in 2050. Johnson recently presented his plans for a green revolution. Among other things, he wants to ban cars with internal combustion engines from 2030. What about infrastructure? Domestically, Johnson intends to invest primarily in road, rails, fiber optics, schools and hospitals. The aim is to level the differences between the rich south and the structurally weak regions in the north. However, this alignment will be made more difficult by Brexit because it entails additional costs for many companies and could cost jobs in structurally weak regions. And what about deregulation? One does not want to become a Singapore on the Thames, asserts the British government. The country cannot afford major tax cuts anyway due to the high corona deficit. But things will be done a little differently in the future, says Finance Minister Rishi Sunak. Details are not yet known. The government is also subject to strict limits because the EU can react to violations of fair competition with punitive tariffs. And what about free ports? They talked a lot about this before Brexit. Whenever Johnson has to name the advantages of Brexit, the first thing that comes to mind is the free ports. Although many EU countries do have free ports, just say Hamburg, in case of Germany, for example. But yeah, by the end of the year, 10 free ports are to be built in the Kingdom, which should attract companies with zero tariffs and lower labor costs. Critics point out that as a member of the EU, Great Britain had 7 free ports until 2012, but has abolished them again. The macroeconomic benefits are controversial because they relocate activity within the country and cost tax revenues. And another downside of that is free ports are absolutely excluded from the current deal that is written into the deal. What about agriculture? The government wants to gradually phase out the automatic per hectare subsidies that were common in the EU by 2028. In the end, farmers should only receive government grants if they create more biodiversity on their land. The reform means radical rehab for many farmers. In 2024, they will only receive half of the previous grants per hectare. The National Farmers Union, the NFU, warns that many farmers will not survive the quick transition. But the tax money will be used more purposefully in the future. Above all, wealthy large landowners can no longer collect millions for doing nothing. In the long term, Britain will prosper powerfully, says Johnson. But his leeway is initially limited because the government is busy with the two current crises, Corona and Brexit, for the foreseeable future. The second Corona wave is once again pushing the health system to its limit. Most recently, more than 50,000 new cases and more than 900 deaths were recorded every day. The new trade barriers with the EU are also forecast to mean that the economy will grow more slowly this year. Still, Johnson spreads optimism for the new year. He is hopeful that the AstraZeneca vaccine is now a second vaccine approved in Great Britain. This not only has the advantage that it is produced in their own country, it is also less sensitive than the BioNTech and Pfizer vaccines, so it's easier to distribute. At Easter, the worst of the pandemic will be behind them, the head of government predicts. By then, the new processes after Brexit should also have run their course. Truck jams are expected at the borders in the coming weeks because everyone involved has to get used to the new border controls. In the first few days, however, there could be less traffic than expected because many freight forwarders wait and avoid the border. A number of companies have also extended their Christmas break and increased their stocks. How smoothly the transition takes place for Great Britain depends largely on the EU. In many areas there are transitional regulations so that the cord will be cut off gradually. Johnson's predecessor Theresa May summed it up in Parliament on last week's Wednesday. The EU will not disappear from everyday British life. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel and my other channels. I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.